Meet Lady Margaret, the powerful head of the Turner family. She had been away from her grand estate for a few months, contemplating her next move. She had built the family's vineyard empire business from the ground up, turning it into a global success. Yet with her son, Edward Turner, ready to take over the reins, she found herself questioning what the future held. Edward, though a man of great intellect and charm, was known for his secrecy. Very few had actually seen his face, and even fewer knew the true nature of his heart. His privacy made him a mystery, even within the company. Back at the vineyard, the staff buzzed with speculation. News had spread that Edward would soon be taking charge, and the employees couldn't stop gossiping.
I heard he's incredibly handsome,
whispered one junior assistant, her voice tinged with excitement.
and loaded.
Can you imagine if he notices you?
The speculation was endless, but nobody knew exactly when Edward would appear, or even what he looked like. Lady Margaret, however, had different plans. Instead of making a grand entrance as the respected chairwoman, she decided to go undercover, though not in the traditional way. She didn't choose to be a humble cleaner, as one might expect. No, Margaret had a far bolder idea in mind. She decided to become a street beggar, blending into the rough and often overlooked corners of the city, where no one would recognize her. In the guise of a homeless woman, with ragged clothes and an old, weathered coat, she would get a taste of life without privilege, all the while keeping an eye on the operations at the vineyard. With nothing but a battered old cup to collect spare change, Lady Margaret wandered the streets near the vineyard, covering her face with dirt and a long, dirty old hair she put on to disguise, unnoticed by most. The familiar world of luxury and power was far behind her now. As she sat on the cold pavement, she watched the passers-by with sharp, observant eyes. Most ignored her, as they did to many beggars, but others cast pitying glances her way. No one suspected that the woman asking for a coin was, in fact, the matriarch of one of the wealthiest families in the region. It was all part of Madame Margaret's plan. She knew that to truly understand the vineyard's inner workings, she needed to see it from a different perspective. And more importantly, she had a secret mission. She was determined to find a woman who would love Edward for the man he was, not for his money or status. It would take time, but Margaret was patient. She had all the time in the world to make sure Edward would find someone worthy of him, someone who could see beyond his wealth. As Lady Margaret sat on the cold stone steps, blending into the backdrop of city life, she began to see the vineyard and its people in a way she never had before. From her humble position, she observed how easily those were. Though she was now a beggar, Lady Margaret's sharp eyes never missed a detail. She watched the office workers from the vineyard as they passed by on their lunch breaks, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the true identity of the woman on the corner. It wasn't long before she caught sight of someone who stood out among the rest. Eleanor Rose, a young woman with a quick wit and a quiet strength, was one of the few people who noticed her. Eleanor worked as a junior lawyer at the vineyard, a rising star in the legal department. One afternoon, Lady Margaret overheard a group of employees mocking a young man who had stopped to offer a few coins. The whisper started loud enough for Eleanor to hear. "Ah, look at him. What a mess," one of the women sneered. Another added, "He probably can't even keep a job." Begging for scraps in the streets. The cruel laughter echoed in the air. But Eleanor, who had witnessed this scene unfold from a distance, was having none of it. With a swift movement, she stepped forward and addressed the group. "Enough," Eleanor said sharply, her voice firm but calm. "What's wrong with you? You can't see past your own noses to treat others with some dignity. How is it that you're comfortable ridiculing someone just because they have fallen on hard times?" The room of women fell silent as Eleanor crossed her arms, staring each one down.
Don't you have better things to do than tearing people down? She added, her tone unwavering.
For a moment, the group exchanged awkward glances. The power of Eleanor's words had an effect, and though no one said another word, the energy in the space shifted. One by one, they walked away, leaving the young lawyer standing tall, a subtle smile playing at the corner of her lips. Lady Margaret, though still in her disguise, couldn't help but feel a wave of admiration. The kindness Eleanor had shown not only in her words but in her actions reminded Lady Margaret of the kind of woman Edward needed by his side. Someone strong who understood the world beyond wealth and status, who cared for people beyond their appearance. As Eleanor returned to her desk, Lady Margaret's mind raced. This was the one. But would she be open to the idea of love, real love, without the promise of riches? As the days turned into weeks, Lady Margaret continued her watch from the streets, carefully observing the interactions within the vineyard. While she waited for the right moment to approach Eleanor, her attention was constantly drawn to the young woman's unshakable resolve. Eleanor had become something of a quiet hero in the office, admired by some for her sharp legal mind, yet underestimated by others who mistook her humility for weakness. One morning, the vineyard buzzed with an unusual energy. Edward Turner, still working undercover as the humble intern, had been assigned to assist Eleanor with a high-profile case involving the sale of a rare collection of wines to a prestigious collector in Europe. While Lady Margaret kept her distance, she could see how well they worked together. There was an effortless rhythm to their collaboration, an unspoken understanding between them that made Lady Margaret's heart swell with approval. Eleanor, though initially taken aback by the quiet intern's deep knowledge of wine law, quickly came to appreciate his insights. "You've got a good head on your shoulders for someone just starting out," she remarked one afternoon, glancing up from the case files. Edward, his eyes warm but his expression modest, smiled. "I've spent a lot of time reading. I guess you could say I'm a bit of a bookworm." His humble attitude struck a chord with Eleanor, and she found herself enjoying their time together more than she had anticipated. But Lady Margaret wasn't fooled. She could see past Edward's unassuming exterior. Though he had chosen to remain under the radar, there was no doubt in her mind this was the man who was meant to lead the Turner family vineyard. And as she watched their partnership unfold, she knew it was only a matter of time before Eleanor would see what she had seen from the start. Their late nights spent reviewing the case and discussing strategies were becoming more frequent. The laughter between them grew, as did the camaraderie. As the two spent more time together, a subtle but undeniable chemistry began to form. Edward had been working tirelessly to maintain his disguise, but each passing day made it harder to ignore the pull he felt toward Eleanor. Meanwhile, Lady Margaret observed from the shadows, her plans for the future taking shape. As the weeks passed, Eleanor and Edward's partnership grew stronger, blossoming from professional respect into something more personal. Their late nights working together became more frequent, and their conversations moved beyond case files and legal arguments. They shared laughter, stories, and quiet moments of mutual admiration. Eleanor found herself drawn to Edward's quiet strength, while he admired her intellect and unwavering integrity. Lady Margaret, still in disguise, watched the two of them carefully. She had seen the way Edward looked at Eleanor, and it was clear to her that they were beginning to fall for each other. Yet there was still a subtle hesitation, as if neither wanted to acknowledge the growing feelings between them. It was exactly what Lady Margaret had hoped for, but she knew that she needed to move faster if she were to ensure that they would be together. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with anticipation as the staff began to whisper about Edward's potential return as the true head of the vineyard. The air was thick with competition, as many employees had already begun planning how they would impress him. Eleanor, however, remained focused on her work, unaware that Edward was more than just the intern he appeared to be. The day Edward could no longer remain hidden arrived. He stood up in front of the office, his heart pounding as he prepared to reveal the truth. "I'm not just an intern," he said calmly. "My name is Edward Turner, heir to the Turner Vineyard Empire. I've been working undercover to understand how things run here at the vineyard." The room fell into stunned silence. Eleanor's breath caught as she stared at him, struggling to process what she had just heard. But before she could respond, Lady Margaret stepped forward from the back of the room, revealing herself to be the matriarch of the family. "I've been watching you both," she said, her voice filled with pride. "And I believe that you, Eleanor, are the woman who will stand by my grandson's side." The shock in the room was palpable. Edward had kept his identity secret, not just for professional reasons, but because he didn't want anyone to see him as the heir to the vineyard. He wanted people to see him for who he truly was, not for his wealth. Eleanor, now understanding the depth of the situation, felt a mixture of emotion, surprise, confusion, and something deeper she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge. As the weeks passed, Eleanor's relationship with Edward began to grow stronger, but not without its challenges. Veronica, a colleague. However, Edward, now fully aware of the situation, stood by Eleanor's side, determined to expose the truth. He confronted Veronica in front of the entire office, denouncing her actions. "I know Eleanor, and I know she would never do something like this," he said firmly. "You will pay for what you've done." The tension in the office was thick, but Veronica's lies were soon revealed, and she was removed from the vineyard. Lady Margaret, observing from the sidelines, couldn't help but smile. Her plan to bring Edward and Eleanor together was working perfectly. Just when things seemed to settle, a new challenge emerged. Lily, an old acquaintance of Edward's, returned to the vineyard. She was stunningly beautiful, wearing designer clothes and dripping with elegance. Lily had a history with Edward, and her sudden reappearance sent waves of insecurity through Eleanor. Rumors quickly spread that Lily was still in love with Edward, and the staff began to gossip about their past relationship. Lily, sensing Eleanor's discomfort, approached her with a sweet but condescending smile.
"I see you've caught his eye," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But you should know that there's a reason Edward and I were once together. You're nothing like me." Eleanor, standing her ground, met Lily's gaze. "I don't need to compare myself to anyone. I am who I am, and I'm confident in that."
Edward, seeing the tension between the two women, stepped in to put an end to the situation.
"Lily," he said coldly, "I've moved on from the past. You and I are history. Eleanor is the one I want to be with."
As the days passed, the tension between Lily and Eleanor continued to simmer. Lily's manipulative actions grew more blatant, and Edward began to feel the weight of his past decisions. His love for Eleanor was undeniable, but the history with Lily continued to haunt him. He knew that in order to move forward, he had to completely sever ties with his past. Lady Margaret, ever the strategist, decided it was time for a final confrontation. She invited Eleanor to a private meeting, where she laid everything on the table.
"You know, Eleanor," she said with a knowing smile, "Edward and I both need you, but you have to trust that this is real. He loves you, and you are the one he wants."
Eleanor, still unsure of what to believe, turned to Edward, who had quietly entered the room.
"I'm done with the past," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I want to build a future with you, Eleanor. No more secrets."
After the whirlwind of drama and betrayal, Eleanor and Edward found themselves stronger than ever. They decided to marry in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by only those who truly understood the depth of their connection. Lady Margaret, proud of how far they had come, watched with tears in her eyes as they exchanged vows. Their love story had been anything but conventional, but in the end, it was their honesty, trust, and commitment to each other that had triumphed. As they walked down the aisle, hand in hand, they knew that their journey was just beginning. Life at the vineyard settled into a new rhythm. Edward, now the rightful heir to the Turner family empire, continued to work alongside Eleanor, building the future of the vineyard with passion and dedication. Lady Margaret, content with the success of her plan, stepped back, watching as the couple forged their path together. As they sat on the balcony of their home, overlooking the vineyard that would one day be theirs, Eleanor turned to Edward, her heart full of love. "I never imagined it would turn out like this," she said softly. Edward smiled, his hand resting gently on hers. "Neither did I, but I wouldn't change a thing. Together we'll make this work." Lady Margaret, observing from a distance, smiled to herself. The Vineyard Empire was in good hands, and the future was bright for the Turner family. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. The love that had blossomed between Eleanor and Edward would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please take a second to like, subscribe, share and comment on it so you will get a notification whenever we post fresh new contents like this one.